The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
And we're back. Guess who's back? Da-na-na. Back again. Da-na-na. Not Slim Shady, but it is the return of intelligent wrestling conversation. I'm your host, Billy Donnelly of ThisIsInfamous.com, and this is the triumphant return of the only wrestling podcast out there that approaches what goes on in the squared circle with context, reasoning, logic, and last but certainly not least, intelligence. I want to apologize right at the front of the show here. It's been weeks. How many weeks is weeks? Weeks. Several weeks. A few weeks. A number of weeks. Where the podcast has been on the shelf. I have been on the shelf. Dealing with some dental issues. Not one, but two. Teeth extractions. Ooh. It's rough. Horrible. Lots of swelling. Not really lots of swelling, but a decent amount of pain. At least on the second one. The second one felt worse than the first one. And I had a lot of numbing sensation. Not like I was just drooling everywhere, but it definitely felt like half of my face, at least a quarter of my face, the lower bottom right side of my face, felt like it was asleep all the time. Like I had laid on it wrong and just fell asleep a good amount of the time. So not exactly ideal to try and podcast during those weeks. I could have. It sounded a little slurry with my mouth in pain, sort of sustaining life on a lot of soup and mashed potatoes. And so as a result, I decided to just sort of put the show on a temporary hiatus, take a break, a slight vacation to heal up, deal with these issues, let my mouth sort of get back to normal, and then I could dive right back into doing the podcast. So thank you for bearing with me. I hope you made it back to this brand new episode, this brand new edition, because this is a historic show. This is a historic show to deal with historic happenings. And look, I understand. There's a lot of stuff that I missed. Okay? We didn't do a show post No Mercy, which I'm sorry for. We didn't do a show to talk about all the TNA issues. Didn't do a show to talk about the return of Goldberg and what that means for Survivor Series. Look, if you want my take on any of those issues, okay, you just go ahead and either tweet at me at InfamousKid, K-I-D-D, at InfamousKid, ask me a question, I'll shoot it right back at you, okay? Or you send me an email, okay? Shoot me an email, theiwcshow at gmail.com, theiwcshow, or the IWC at gmail.com, and I'll give you a response back. And, if we get on that, maybe we'll set something cool up. Maybe we'll do just like a whole, set aside a time on Twitter to just do some questions. Maybe we'll do a Facebook Live. We could do some cool stuff. If you really want my take on what's going on in the wrestling world at some of those opportunities. I even saw my first ever live Ring of Honor show while on hiatus. So, once again, you have any questions for me, you want my opinion on anything, you want my take on anything that's been happening the last few weeks, you go ahead, shoot me a tweet, shoot me an email, and we'll address it, and we'll figure out a way to go from there so that you know my thoughts, my opinions, my grasp on anything that's happened while we were on break. This show, though, as we return, is now the post Hell in a Cell podcast. That's what this particular podcast is going to be done for. So 2 wrestling podcasts you can expect this week. One later in the week to talk about the fallout on Monday Night Raw, as well as what's happening on SmackDown right now. But this particular show right here is just going to be reserved for anything and everything that went down last night in Boston, Massachusetts, at the Raw-only pay-per-view Hell in a Cell. Okay? So now that we have that set, and you wanted to hear about anything else, wait for later in the week. We'll get into some of that. But right now, at least, right now, here, in this moment, we're going to talk about Hell in a Cell. A historic night. As I mentioned, this is a historic podcast to talk about a historic night in the WWE. For 2 reasons. Number 1, this was going to be the first ever time that 2 female participants, 2 women superstars, 2 former quote-unquote divas would be stepping into the ring, a WWE ring, and having the Hell in a Cell structure lowered down around them. This was going to be the first ever women's Hell in a Cell match, which is history in and of itself. Now, the second point, which also makes this match historic, already historic by being the first ever Hell in a Cell women's match, but beyond that, this was the first time ever in the history of the WWE, the WWF, the WWF, the entire McMahon legacy, that a women's match headlined, main evented, went on last at a pay-per-view. It's pretty incredible. Sasha Banks, the boss, also maybe the love of my life. My wife doesn't know it, but it's possible. Stepping into the ring with Charlotte Flair for a Hell in a Cell main event match. Now, heading in, this was sort of billed as a triple main event. 3 Hell in a Cell matches on the card, which for me is a lot. I don't even like when there's 1 Hell in a Cell match per year. I don't even like the idea of there being a particular pay-per-view called Hell in a Cell, because it means we're going to absolutely get Hell in a Cell and sort of wedge a feud or a match into the cage. And I'm never a fan of it, because it feels so formulaic, it feels so by the book, it feels so by the numbers, it feels so routine, it feels so normal. And as a result, the Hell in a Cell becomes less special, loses some importance, loses a little bit of a luster. And let's not forget, this is already the second time this calendar year where we have seen the Hell in a Cell rolled out. We had a Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania not too long ago, where Shane McMahon plunged himself from the heavens down onto an empty announce table where The Undertaker had been laid out. So when you start to get a lot of Hell in a Cell, Hell in a Cell sort of doesn't mean what people would like it to. There's a standard, there's an expectation that's been sort of thrust upon the Hell in a Cell match, and when you see it all the time, and when you see it with such frequency, it becomes difficult for the performers at least, to top what has come before them. Sometimes you need, absence makes the heart grow fonder, and sometimes you need to have a distance from something like this so that you miss it. Then when it's announced again, you get excited. Oh, Hell in a Cell is back. It's going to be amazing. As opposed to like, Hell in a Cell was just out a couple months ago. So look, going into this particular card where you had a triple main event, 3 Hell in a Cell matches, I'm not going to say I was skeptical. But I was uneasy about how the night may get laid out. I was willing to give the WWE and the Raw creative team the benefit of the doubt. I was willing to be open-minded and hopeful that they would figure out a way to make these 3 matches work. Okay, you can't have the matches come in succession of one another. You got to sort of spread them out throughout the night. But I thought if you structure the matches properly and you build them throughout the night, by the time you get to the main event, you can have something truly excellent. Now, that means the first match is going to suffer a little bit because they can't go full tilt right out of the gate, because then you got nowhere left to go. But I thought if they structured the night properly, if they were able to sort of escalate the violence in an upward trend across the 3 matches, to start out a little, then increase it more, and then go much stronger in the main event, then you could make these 3 matches work. Now, with that being said, it leads to the question of, why do you need 3 Hell in a Cell matches then, if the early one at least, is going to be tame by comparison to what comes later? That's a fair point, but let's not forget, the WWE has already made the call to have 3 Hell in a Cell matches. So you can't really Monday morning quarterback that and say, well, they shouldn't have had those matches. They were going to have those matches. They decided to have those matches, so we got to live with it and roll with the punches and hope for the best, that they are able to then execute a solid plan to make those 3 matches work. So let's start at the main event, and then we can sort of work our way backwards through the night. So we'll go to the main event, then we'll go to the opener, then we'll go to the one in the middle, and sort of this way I can comment on the way that the night was laid out, which I thought the WWE actually did fairly well in building these 3 matches. So let's get to the main event, which is Sasha Banks versus Charlotte. We're going to talk about that first, A, because it went on last, but also because of the historic significance of this match. Once again, 2 women main eventing a WWE pay-per-view. Never happened before. 2 women inside the Hell in a Cell. Never happened before. Raw Women's title on the line here, which has been elevated as talent has been called up. So between Charlotte, between Sasha Banks, between Bayley, the women's title on Monday Night Raw is meaningful. And you have a really strong feud between Sasha and Charlotte going. So to put them inside Hell in a Cell after what's been going on for months, sort of going back towards WrestleMania and the triple threat match that involved Becky Lynch and the crowning of that first ever official women's champion, there's been something going on between Sasha and Charlotte. Now, this also, if you really want to dig deep into the history vaults of the WWE, stretches back into NXT territory, where Charlotte held the title at the time that Sasha Banks captured it, before she moved on and was called up to the main roster. So there was something going on back a number of years. This is sort of a feud that's been alive in some sense for about 2.5 years if you go all the way back towards NXT. Now, I understand the casual Raw or WWE viewer isn't following along the timeline with NXT, but from where I stand as a fan, this feud does have a richer history, sort of knowing really where it began back down in Full Sail in Orlando. Now, I have been crazy about their matches on the main roster in recent months. And that goes beyond sort of Sasha getting injured at SummerSlam and being on the shelf for a little bit. But I just... And look, I'm not trying to pee in your soup or on your party or in the parade or wherever. I'm not trying to urinate anywhere right now in regards to Sasha and Charlotte. I think that the main event that they had on Monday Night Raw a few weeks back, I thought was solid. However, I think since they have been called to the main roster and they are trying to prove that they belong, that they should be taken seriously by the WWE Universe, it almost feels like some of these matches have been trying too hard. Going back to their time in NXT, and this is a match that you would have to really, really look for. It was not televised. You won't find it on the network. But one of their encounters, which was at the NXT house show in San Jose over WrestleMania weekend for WrestleMania 31, Sasha and Charlotte, in front of what at that time was the largest NXT crowd they had ever performed in front of, absolutely tore the house down. Absolutely tore the house down. And it was less high risk, less spotty at times, much more of a story, a good psychological tale between those two women competitors in the ring, and as a result, the crowd loved it. And once again, it started out slow and then escalated. You could feel the emotion in the building. You had people chanting for Sasha, you had people chanting for Charlotte, and they blew the roof off that convention center. I don't think it was a convention center. That small arena, it was like 5,000 people or so in San Jose at that point in time. And I feel like what they've been doing on the main roster thus far has been much more to the spectacle, because that is sort of where the audience is at this moment in time, that in order for them to do something that sticks, in order for them to be legitimized, in order for them to gain respect, they need to go above and beyond and create something memorable for the fans rather than just really good matches. It's a sort of flawed way of thinking. I can't fault it too much because I know why they're doing it. You know, they're trying to say, hey, we're here, we belong, we're not divas anymore. But they do run a risk factor in those matches, and I think that they're missing something, just a little something that I think the NXT matches sort of had. The Sasha Charlotte matches, the Sasha Bayley matches, the Fatal 4-Way between the Four Horsewomen, those matches I think were really solid. So look, heading into this match, I was excited. I was excited for seeing two women inside the Hell in a Cell. I was excited to see Sasha and Charlotte go at it one more time. I was excited to see the women's title once again elevated to a higher level, a greater degree than it has been before, because women's wrestling is right now on fire. So you got to keep feeding the beast of the fans who are rallying behind this, who wanted to see divas become extinct, who wanted to see women wrestlers compete and show what they're capable of. So, going into this match, I was really excited about it. And I was a little scared. I'm not going to lie. I was a little frightened heading into this match because of the fact that some of their stuff has been a little bit sloppy in recent months, trying to make their mark. And as a result, look, I don't want to see anybody, men or women or tag team or animal or whoever's going to step into a wrestling ring at any point in time. I don't want to see anyone put themselves in serious danger for my entertainment. I say this all the time. There are times where things happen and they are absolutely cringeworthy because I do not want to see someone injure themselves for my applause, for my smile, for my excitement. I'm not saying you gotta play it safe all the time, but there's a line. You gotta know your line. You draw the line and you don't cross that line when it comes to the risk and reward. So going into this match, I was a little concerned because knowing how much this honor being bestowed upon Sasha and Charlotte meant to them, I had to do the sign of the cross prior to the cell being lowered in the hopes that neither of them died or were seriously injured. And as I sat and watched it, I was like, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die. Number one, I don't want to watch anybody die while watching professional wrestling. But number two, these are real talented women and they have a lot going for them, and I don't want to see them harm themselves, put their careers in jeopardy for a moment of glory. I thought this match was really solid. I thought this was emotional wrestling storytelling at its best. When it is really good. When it can just reach into your chest, just grab hold of your heartstrings and sort of puppet it around to make you feel what it wants you to feel. I thought this was so good at that. Because as you sort of see the emotion on the faces of Sasha and Charlotte as the cage is lowered down and Sasha then attacks, or Charlotte attacks Sasha, and sort of this brawl outside the cell occurs, you know that you're going to get something interesting. You get a scrap in the crowd. They start to scale the cage, which to that point in the night we hadn't seen, so it makes you, once again, deep down inside your moral compass, hope and pray someone doesn't do something incredibly stupid for my entertainment. Hoping somebody doesn't die, because you don't want to see any of these women try to leap off the cage, which is a monster. This isn't the cage that Mick Foley got thrown off, mind you. When Shane McMahon took that dive off that cell at WrestleMania, that is way higher than what Mick Foley was thrown off years ago by The Undertaker. Not the same. But so, Charlotte does a powerbomb to Sasha Banks through the announce table, which looked ugly because Sasha Banks is so light. She's so small. So she just sort of like bounces and slides off the table. You know? You sort of go back to the WrestleMania 30 idea of Sasha Banks not being able to continue, much in the way that Daniel Bryan was beaten down so much they were going to have to stretcher him out and render his opportunity to defend the title, or at that point in time to win the title, obsolete. You feel for Sasha Banks in that moment as she's being tended to by medics, as she's being backboarded and loaded onto the stretcher. You feel for it because the match has got you. The setup has got you. The emotion of the moment has got you. Like it should. Like wrestling should. And so when Charlotte's going to be crowned by forfeit and Sasha rallies herself off of there and angrily and defiantly stumbles into the cage and is ready to fight, you feel it. Yes! You erupt inside. Yes! This is happening. Even though you know that it's meant to do that, it still feels so good because you've suspended your disbelief. The moment has got you. And you're in. You're in the moment. You're in with these two women. You're in the cage. You're locked inside. You're ready to go. You got skin in the game now. Oh, it's so good. So good when wrestling can do this. So good. Now, look. I think the match itself is pretty solid for the women's first time inside Hell in a Cell. Okay? There is, I think, a necessary double standard for Sasha Banks versus Charlotte against any other Hell in a Cell match that happened last night on this card or in the history of Hell in a Cell matches over the years. Because this is, once again, the first time women have ever done this. And so you would have to sort of go back to the Bad Blood pay-per-view. Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker. The first time ever in the Hell in a Cell for comparison. Because at that point in time, too, you didn't really know what to make of a Hell in a Cell. We'd seen steel cage matches before, but this was slightly different. And so there was still a feeling out process going on with the Hell in a Cell. What can we do in there? How does this work? What are our limitations? What are the strengths of this structure? And I think Sasha and Charlotte sort of ran into that because, first and foremost, you weren't going to have a match, and as we know, sort of the WWE standard right now, that was going to incorporate any sort of bloodshed. Not that I really want to see Sasha or Charlotte with the proverbial crimson mask, but within the Hell in a Cell right now, which of course being a steel cage structure, inherently probably should have some color involved in the matches that take place inside. So now you have to figure out what else can we do in there? What else will work in there to sort of tell the story of this match? Which is Sasha battling injury and sort of this heinous attack prior to the bell being rung. And Charlotte fighting for the title as well as the respect of Sasha Banks, sort of trying to humiliate her in her own hometown to, as she would say, bow down to the queen. So how do you make that work without the Cell becoming sort of a character in and of the match itself, with the bloodshed, with the carnage in a women's match? So they used chairs, they used tables. I thought that worked fairly well. I thought the match was solid for being the women's first time inside the Hell in a Cell. Is it the greatest Hell in a Cell match I've ever seen? No. Is it the best women's match inside Hell in a Cell I've ever seen? Yes, because it's the only one. Is there room for improvement? Of course. And there's going to be a comfort that comes with this, much in the same way that there was a comfort in the Hell in the Cell as it grew its legacy. The more certain competitors were in there, the more Triple H was in there, the more The Undertaker was in there, the more Shawn Michaels was in there, the more these competitors got used to the structure and what they could do with it, the more they could sort of spin their wheels creatively and figure out how this structure could work in their favor to create a spectacle. The women are going to have sort of those growing pains with the Hell in the Cell, and I would advise some patience, because this won't be the last time we see women inside the Hell in the Cell. This is the first time, though, and so you gotta cut them a break. But I thought overall the match was pretty solid. I still don't think it was the best match we've seen between Sasha and Charlotte. I would still go back to San Jose and the house show. I would still go back to those NXT days. I think they're trying to carefully walk a fine line in the main roster without being too wrestle heavy. But I thought overall it was a really good main event. And I was entertained and I was emotionally invested. The finish, though, kind of a head scratcher. I don't know that Charlotte regaining the title already so soon after Sasha just won it not long ago, just a couple weeks ago. I don't know that Charlotte regaining that title immediately and sort of yo-yoing the title between them again and sort of keeping the feud going, I guess, was the best choice. Now, look, on the Raw roster, you sort of have a three-women triangle here. Nia Jax is still there, but I still think she's very green. They haven't really done anything to build her up any further beyond sort of squashing Alicia Fox. And so you're sort of stuck with a lack of depth on the Raw roster. You have Sasha, you have Bayley, you have Charlotte, and sort of this round-robin situation, which I think is unfortunate because you don't want to get tired of just seeing the same women fed to each other. You don't want to see that. So, I don't know where you go from here. You know, the Hell in a Cell should sort of be a blow-off for the time being. And I guess maybe you move to Bayley and Charlotte, or you could, I guess, do Bayley and Sasha next. But it feels like a leap. You know, these women are going to be around for a long time. And I don't think there is a need to have to rush through this. Let's not forget, 2.5 years ago, these women were still down in NXT. And they've grown so quickly, so fast, so rapidly within the WWE structure that we don't need to rush it through. Let's take our time. They don't have to wrestle every week. They don't have to wrestle every night or every televised event or necessarily every pay-per-view. Stretch them out. Build anticipation for them. Look, Goldberg and Brock Lesnar are happening in Survivor Series. We knew about that in mid-August. The pay-per-view doesn't take place until November. There's nothing wrong with building anticipation for those big matches weeks upon weeks upon weeks in advance and slowly building them. Everything doesn't have to be, well, we see them fight every single week and then we sort of feel stale or tired by the time we get to the matches. So I don't know what's going to happen next. I would have liked to see Sasha hold on to that title for a little bit longer and then see where things go from there. Obviously, Sasha and Bayley is going to be a big moneymaker for the women's division, but you look at that and you go, well, where does that leave Charlotte? It feels like right now they're in a spot where one woman is going to be constantly left out because Dana Brooke, I'll get to her in a little bit, is not quite ready for prime time. So it's a bit of a head scratcher because I don't know where Sasha goes from here. I don't know where Charlotte goes from here, even though Bayley seems to be the obvious direction. But now, once again, that leaves somebody left out. So a little bit let down that they didn't sort of let the Sasha reign go on a little bit longer. Especially since she gave it up the first time in order to sort of rest up and deal with injury, and is now giving up the second time in order for the belt to get back on Charlotte. There's a part of me that thinks that they are grooming Charlotte over time to sort of get to approach or maybe even surpass her dad's record as the 16-time world champion by perhaps being the 16-time or 16-time plus women's champion at some point in history. I think that is a part of it. I think they do like that legacy aspect of it. They do like seeing Charlotte as the first ever women's champion, which she was crowned at WrestleMania. They like seeing her as the winner of the first ever Hell in a Cell match. I'm sure another first, they would love to have sort of Charlotte lay claim to that history. They are definitely building her up as a sort of Hall of Fame candidate down the line if they can get her that far. But I would like it to not be at the detriment of other competitors who I think also bring a lot to the division. I have nothing against Charlotte. I think she has a tremendous future in front of her. I just would hope that everyone else, sort of all boats get rise with this high tide, and not just sort of one of them. So with that said, kudos to Vince McMahon and the Raw creative team for making the bold choice of headlining this pay-per-view with a women's title match. We have talked about this. Stephanie McMahon has talked about this, about one day them being able to headline a pay-per-view. I thought this was the perfect time to execute that and sort of get that under their belt. And I look forward to the women's division continuing to grow on both Raw and on SmackDown. All right, with that said, let's switch gears. Let's move to one of the other Hell in a Cell matches. So we'll move to the opener, which was Rusev versus Roman Reigns for the United States title. Now, midway through this show, I got a little bit of a confession to make as we were leading up and into Hell in a Cell. Because I have felt so terrible the last few weeks. My mouth had just been sort of in agony and sort of taking a hiatus from the show. I have not felt all that compelled at all to watch wrestling product at all. So, since we've taken the hiatus, I have not watched one full episode of Monday Night Raw. I have not watched one full episode of SmackDown Live. I've sort of been in the dark on the build leading up to Hell in a Cell. I've seen snippets, I've seen clips, I followed along to make sure I knew everything that was important was going down, but I haven't actually sat down on the couch and watched full episodes. As I was giving my mouth a break, sort of giving myself a mental health break from wrestling the past few weeks, in order to be able to approach something like this, Hell in a Cell, with fresh eyes. So, going into this opening match for the U.S. title with Rusev and Roman Reigns, let's travel back in the DeLorean a few weeks ago to where I was on this feud between Rusev and Roman Reigns. For me, Roman Reigns was the heel in this setup, and Rusev had been the babyface. Rusev defending his wife's honor, Rusev whose post-wedding celebration was ruined, Roman Reigns who's sort of a dick to both Rusev and his new bride, Lana. And as I watched this, I said to myself, man, how is anybody supposed to rally behind Roman Reigns when he behaves like this? This isn't about being not a good guy or a bad guy, but the guy. This is about this guy being a jerk-off. And I found it incredibly difficult to root for him, which is what the WWE really wanted me to do. But the way he had been booked was as such a douchebag that it was impossible for me to cheer for that guy. I would rather cheer for the anti-American foreigner, because at least I could be sympathetic to what he was going through. And so, in taking weeks off from watching Monday Night Raw, I was able to sort of reset the feud here for me. And coming into the match, I was able to say, well, okay, let's take Rusev as a heel, let's take Roman Reigns as a babyface, and let's go from square one. Let's start over. Let's reset. and see how this match may play. Now, I thought that the way the match came across overall was pretty well, because of the fact that, once again, with 3 Hell in a Cell matches on the card, you have to be very careful in how they are structured. You can't have Rusev and Roman Reigns go nuts right out of the gate, because then there's nowhere to go but down for Seth Rollins versus Kevin Owens and for Sasha and Charlotte. But I thought what this match did was choose the weaponry in the cage and under the ring to sort of accentuate them being inside Hell in a Cell. Once again, this didn't really have to be a Hell in a Cell match. The way the match was sort of laid out, it could have been like a steel steps match, whatever the hell that is, because that was the main accessory chosen by both competitors in this match. But because of the way that they used it, the fact that they weren't going full-blown plunder inside the cage sort of fell by the wayside. You wouldn't notice. It wasn't distracting or jarring. You just said, all right, well, they're using these other things. They're using a kendo stick. They're using a chain. They're using steel steps. They're using things that nobody else is going to be using later. And that was sort of the what I thought to be one of the strengths of this pay-per-view, is that each match approached the Hell in a Cell differently. Rusev and Roman Reigns used those weapons. Kendo stick, chain, steel steps. Seth Rollins versus Kevin Owens, which I'll get to in a few minutes, used tables and interference. Sasha Banks versus Charlotte used tables, used the announce table, used the cage more than the others did. So as a result, you had 3 very different Hell in a Cell matches, which is difficult to pull off. It is difficult to have 3 of the same match in one night and have each one feel different, but they all were able to apply different skill sets to the layout of their particular matches in order for this to work. So, I thought Rusev versus Roman Reigns, who I thought have had excellent matches, once again did it again. They have really good chemistry. Rusev has been one of those guys who has brought out the best of Roman Reigns. I don't think Roman Reigns is terrific. I think Roman Reigns is solid. Okay? I think Roman Reigns is very much like John Cena in that he gets a bad rep, but he can surprise you when a big match is called upon for him to step up in. Matches against Seth Rollins, matches against AJ Styles, matches against Rusev. Roman Reigns brings that. So I know like the fanboys always want to shit all over Roman Reigns as he can't wrestle and the 5 moves of doom. But Roman Reigns can bring it. And he is a tremendous match of styles with the right person who can sort of be versatile in their style. Roman Reigns can be tremendous. And I thought we got a little bit more of that here. Now, there was one thing that bothered me, which is, once again, Roman Reigns walks around with this body armor, sort of a Kevlar vest, as part of his in-ring attire. So when Rusev is beating him in the gut or in the chest with a kendo stick or hitting him with a chain, and Roman Reigns is selling it, it's a little bit tough to get past, because you know that it's not really doing a lot of damage, but with that said, you sort of quickly move past it, because I think the chemistry between Rusev and Roman Reigns is really solid. Now, my one issue with this match, and in particular this feud, is that Rusev just never has been given a leg to stand on. He has never been put in a position to sort of rise up in this contest to get over on Roman Reigns, to get any sort of advantage. It's really been all Roman Reigns. When the chips are down and they have a match, it's all Roman Reigns. Rusev may get sort of a jab in or dig in when they're on Monday Night Raw or something like that, but it's all been Roman Reigns. And so when Roman Reigns wins again, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but when he wins again, it makes the win less meaningful because he hasn't had to really overcome any sort of adversity to claim victory in the feud. And that's the thing. When you're laying out a feud, there are battles and there is the war. And you want your guy to win the war, but in order for that victory, that war win to be so sweet, some battles have to be lost along the way. And when you guys undefeated, when you guys romping through the feud, it doesn't really feel much like a rivalry. You know, I grew up a Yankees fan. A big baseball fan. I grew up a Yankees fan. And so as a result, the rivalry was always the Yankees and the Red Sox. Yankees and the Red Sox. So heated, so hated. Yankees and the Red Sox. Except after a while, it didn't feel so much as of a rivalry anymore because it felt incredibly one-sided. When the Yankees were winning all the time, you sort of wrote off the other people. Yeah, they had a rivalry with you, but you didn't really have a rivalry with them anymore because you always won. And so one-sided rivalries don't really work. It wasn't until the Red Sox started winning, started really challenging, started really pushing the Yankees to the test, to the limit, that the rivalry went to a different level. So I think that is the one sort of drawback from the Rusev-Roman Reigns feud, is that they were never able to take it to that next level because they never were willing to give Rusev that meaningful win to make the overall end game of the feud count. The other Hell in a Cell match, Seth Rollins versus Kevin Owens for the Universal title. Once again, haven't really been fully caught up in watching this feud sort of develop. I do like Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho. If you did not catch the Raw Talk, the brand new post-show Raw Talk, which is sort of a knockoff of SmackDown Live, but actually still pretty solid, I would advise you watch it following sort of Hell in a Cell, because Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens got some time on the panel and absolutely just rocked it. And I think the I wasn't sure where their pairing was going for a while, and now I can't live without them. If they ever break these two guys up, I'm going to be incredibly sad. I may actually shed a tear because they're so incredibly entertaining. They're very authentic. Improvisational is what really makes them so watchable, just so compelling to see. And so as a result, going into this match, sort of Seth Rollins versus Kevin Owens, you knew Chris Jericho was lurking. I was interested to see what they were going to do with the Universal title. Did not think they were going to take the belt off of Kevin Owens here, which ultimately they did not. But was curious to see how they were going to move ahead with Kevin Owens getting the win over Seth Rollins in such a sort of definitive match as Hell in a Cell. Kevin Owens, tremendous heel, top-notch heel, one of my favorites, absolutely favorite heels in the wrestling business, probably all time, but definitely right now. And one of the things that he does so well too is that he will shine your baby face up. Okay, he will deliver a vicious beating. He will also help shine the guy up. He will help with that fiery comeback. Kevin Owens knows how to tap into the ring psychology of a match to get you to hate him, even though you really want to cheer for him. But he's just such a despicable in-ring persona that you can't fully buy in, because there's a part of you that still just wants to see this guy sort of get punched in the face. And so Kevin Owens takes these tremendous beatings in matches like this because he sells like crazy the offense of his opponent, but he also delivers something that you can get behind because you know it is vicious, you know it is coming from the gut, you know that Kevin Owens despises the other person who stands across the ring from him. And so you have sort of the teasing of tables being involved here. Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens going back and forth, back and forth. You got to give some credit to WWE Creative for figuring out another way to get somebody inside the Hell in a Cell who doesn't belong there. We've had it done a number of ways over the years. Cameraman's being injured, people jostling with the cage, doors getting ripped off, people coming from underneath the ring, a number of different ways for people to get inside where they don't belong. Here you had Kevin Owens improperly operating a fire extinguisher that was found under the ring, spraying a referee in the face, and then because that guy needs medical attention, allowing the door to be opened, allowing Chris Jericho to interject himself in the match, and sort of creating a 2-on-1 handicap Hell in a Cell match. Obviously, odds stacked against Seth Rollins. You could have Seth Rollins sort of overcome those odds, but I know that they did that on Monday Night Raw, sort of him pinning both Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho, and that sort of being the foreshadowing to that wasn't going to happen when the title was on the line inside the Hell in the Cell. So Chris Jericho gets in the cell, 2-on-1 handicap match occurs. You get Chris Jericho taking his share of the beating, but in the end, you get two guys who do whatever it takes to win. And while I know people will look at this and say, well, you know, why doesn't Kevin Owens win cleanly? Because it will do a lot more for the title win. No, cheating like hell will do more for that title win. That gets you heel heat. That gets you a guy that people hate. That gets a guy who could boast and brag about his winning antics, even though they're unsavory. I thought the match was laid out pretty well, and because of the ending, I thought was positioned properly in the middle of the card to let the women then have the spotlight in the main event. When this match came on mid-show, and I knew that we were getting the women in the main event, I was super excited. But I think also because of the way this match was booked, with Chris Jericho coming in midway through the match, with Chris Jericho having a hand in the finish, with sort of the inevitable Kevin Owens victory due to outside interference, I don't know that that match would have come across, or that finish would have come across well as the last thing on the show. Even though the last thing on the show, which was Charlotte sort of defeating Sasha Banks in what felt like anticlimactic fashion at the time it happened, didn't really fare any better, but at least it was a roll of the dice. They had a better shot with that match. I mean, once again, Sasha Banks is also losing in her hometown, which never really goes over to popping the crowd. But I thought with the way that the Rollins versus Owens was going to finish, that the right call was made to position this one in the middle and put Sasha Banks and Charlotte in the main event spot. Rest of the card outside of the Hell in a Cell matches, I'm going to tell you, nothing really special. Bayley versus Dana Brooke. Dana Brooke is just not good. I've said this repeatedly on the show. She's regressed immensely since she's been called up from NXT. And I realized there was really nowhere left for her to go down in NXT, and they figured, let's put her in there with some more seasoned in-ring competitors, and maybe that'll sort of help her hit her ceiling. It hasn't really worked that way. It has just exposed her as being the limited talent that she is, and she's just not good. And when Bayley struggles to get a decent match out of you, and Bayley, who's just an all-around, just excellent competitor, when she struggles to get a match out of you, the writing's got to be on the wall. You know, Dana Brooke right now is the equivalent of just, well, she means well. I mean, that's what she goes in the ring, and yeah, she tries. And you know she really wants to do well. But wanting to and being able to are two totally separate things. And Dana Brooke, she's just not good. So when you put her in a match, it's not going to be good. And this one with Bayley, really wasn't. Sort of came across as a little bit of a squash. Nice to get Bayley on the card. Nice to get Bayley a win as you sort of build up her exposure to the WWE Universe and vice versa. But Dana Brooke, she means well. But we know how that usually works out. Not very good. Yeah, two other tag matches, neither of which were anything special. Enzo and Big Cass versus Anderson and Gallows. Just sort of your basic standard match. Nothing too exciting. I think Anderson and Gallows, I think they've really just missed the boat on these two guys, and as a result, the feuds that they are in just die these horrible deaths. Because there's nothing, no emotion going in these matches. And Enzo and Big Cass, look, I've long been a fan of Enzo and Big Cass. Been a fan of him down in NXT. Been a fan of him as they've been called up to the main roster. But if I could offer up one critique of these two guys, okay, I just want to put one out there. Because I think that there is something special there for them. They do remind me of sort of a modern-day New Age Outlaws in a number of ways. And as a result, I would like to offer just a slight critique to what it is that they're doing right now, in the hopes that they can sort of right the ship, get better, and then continue their ascent to superstardom in the WWE. I love their charisma. I love their enthusiasm. I love the energy that they bring to the crowd. I love the interactivity of what it is that they do with their introduction and their catchphrases and everything. However, often I have no idea what the hell they're saying. None whatsoever. So they come out before this match with Anderson and Gallows. They cut an opening promo. No idea what it said. No idea what they said. No idea what they meant. No idea what kind of message they were trying to get across. No idea what sort of point they were trying to get across. No idea what they were trying to tell me as a watcher. No idea. No, it lost on me. Just over my head. And I think that if their presentation, and look, they shouldn't be micromanaged and they shouldn't be strangled, okay? Because they're going to lose the uniqueness that they bring to the table. However, what I think that they really need is a little bit more discipline, a little bit more focus. And as a result, you add that to their overall package. You sort of streamline what it is that they want to get across to you rather than just sort of creatively winging it. I think it'll be stronger for them. I think they'll be a more formidable tag team. And I think then down the line, if you ever want to split them and make Enzo sort of a upper mid-carder and Big Cass as a possible main eventer, it allows them to have that foundation to get there. Because right now, I don't know that they can get there. They are entertaining as hell. I love to watch them. But I think just some tweaks are necessary in order to really take them to the next level. New Day versus Cesaro and Sheamus. Also, the match itself, nothing special. I thought the New Day earlier in the pre-show had a tremendous backstage segment with Tom Phillips that showed exactly why they're so over and entertaining. Sheamus and Cesaro, I think, have a real interesting dynamic as the odd couple. And I thought it sort of showed later on with the Raw Talk post-show as well. I don't know that it necessarily translated into the match. I just thought the match was okay. And look, I like all the guys that are involved in it, but I never felt that the match itself got to the next level. I thought the finish was sort of a disqualification ringside. Felt like a cop-out. It is a way to sort of prolong this and give Cesaro and Sheamus another shot at this. I do think that there is some room for them to grow as a tag team. I don't know how much more mileage they can get out of the New Day as tag champs before you sort of add that wrinkle. I think they're going to get them past the Demolition record, and then you maybe take the belts off them and have them sort of start from scratch and rebuild again in order to sort of increase their popularity as giving them some stakes to go after. And I would like to see them get a little bit more serious at times. But the match itself I thought was okay. I like both teams. I like what they're doing with them. I look forward to seeing sort of this feud continue. But I don't know that this match itself did any of them any favors because I thought it was just kind of there on the card. And then the Cruiserweight title, you had TJ Perkins and Brian Kendrick, sorry. Sort of watching the Cruiserweights and what they're able to do, because you had a 6-man tag in the pre-show that I thought was slightly more exciting. The crowd so far has not responded to the Cruiserweight division. Okay, we saw this since its kickoff. We saw this early on with TJ Perkins and Brian Kendrick. We saw it tonight. The crowd just hasn't responded well to it. And I think that there is a disconnect as far as what they expect from the Cruiserweights. Brian Kendrick is not that kind of talent. He's not a flippy guy, which I think a lot of people think comes with the Cruiserweights. He's not going to give you sort of high-flying, high-impact, high-risk, high-reward action. Not a lot of aerial stuff. Not a lot of suicide dives. Not a lot of planchas and corkscrews and springboards. And you're not going to get that stuff from Brian Kendrick. And as a result, TJ Perkins is also a little bit limited, even though I don't think he's the best guy for that either. He does some of it, but that's not that's not really his forte. Guys like Rich Swann, Kota Ibushi, who's not there, unfortunately, on the main roster, but guys like Rich Swann, who else? Cedric Alexander can go high impact a bit, a little bit of high flying. They have guys who can do it. Lince Dorado. They have guys who are capable of that. And as a result, especially as this match began and I watched the crowd respond to it, I wondered, and I didn't think it was too soon, if TJ Perkins was the wrong guy to launch this division with. Granted, I know that they would have loved for it to have been Kota Ibushi. Or even Zack Sabre Jr., who is much more technical too. But I think they would have liked somebody a little bit more high impact, a little bit more exciting to be able to build it around, because I think that's what people have been looking for, as opposed to sort of this slower grind that we've gotten with TJ Perkins and Brian Kendrick. Brian Kendrick gets the win here. Quick hook to put that belt on him and take it off TJ Perkins, considering that the Cruiserweight Classic wasn't too long ago when it wrapped up. So, a quick hook on the TJ Perkins reign. I think the video game entrance has been pretty cool. I think that there is something missing there, though, personality-wise and charisma-wise, that I think TJ Perkins would have been a good in-between champion. I don't think he was the right guy to start this. I don't know that Brian Kendrick is the next guy to get them there, even though heel persona, veteran, gets sort of the theatrics of the WWE. I think they got to look at somebody else who is able to sort of bring excitement into the cruiserweight matches, especially on a one-on-one basis, and that's how you're going to get people excited, because the cruiserweight division, the whole selling point of the cruiserweight division is that it is so much different than everything else. And if you're not giving them anything that feels different, that looks different, that smells different, that just overall is different from what you're getting the other 2 hours, 2.5 hours of Monday Night Raw, then people are going to sort of still sleep on this. So, yeah, I'm not ready to write off the Cruiserweight division entirely. They're experiencing some growing pains, much in the same way that the women's division did when they sort of had an influx of talent from NXT on up. So it's going to take some time for them to figure it out. But I think they got to start looking at some of that more athletic talent that will really get fans to respond to what they're doing in the ring, as opposed to something a little bit more grounded, a little bit more grinding, a little slower paced. They want something a little bit more up-tempo, a little bit more snappy, a little bit more exciting, and I think that would work well to sort of correct the ills of the Cruiserweight division right now. So, overall, you look at the Hell in a Cell matches, I think you had 3 solid Hell in a Cell matches. You got a triple main event. I think all 3 matches paid off. I can question the finishes on at least one of them. But I think those 3 matches make the card. Everything in between is just okay. But the Hell in a Cell matches themselves, the namesake of the pay-per-view, all 3 of those delivered. That gives you a pretty solid pay-per-view to watch. So you watch a Hell in a Cell pay-per-view match, a pay-per-view card to watch Hell in a Cell, and if Hell in a Cell times 3 deliver, and all 3 of them I believe did, that's a pretty interesting card to watch. So kudos there to the WWE. I thought they had a pretty good night. Still got some work to do outside of the main event, and I think they know that. So they got to work on that. But at least on the main event side here for Hell in a Cell, I thought they did pretty well. And once again, kudos to Sasha Banks and Charlotte Flair for making history. Oh, those ladies got more guts than I do. But congratulations. Come a long, long way in a short bit of time. Still a lot of room to travel, a lot of road ahead. But this was a real big moment for women's wrestling and for those two talented women. And having seen them grow through NXT, I'm incredibly proud of what they've been able to accomplish. With that said, let's get to go home and get you on your way and get you out of here on the podcast. So once again, thank you for bearing with the mini vacay. Thank you for bearing with the hiatus. Thank you for dealing with my dental issues with me. The IWC is back, though. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation is back. So keep listening to this episode, to future episodes, and tell your friends. Get them all involved in the conversation as well. Starts on social media, so hit us up at the IWC Show, at the IWC Show. So that's the IWC Show on Twitter. Follow us there. You can also follow at Tis Infamous. So that's the mothership of This Is Infamous, at TIS Infamous, for all our news that goes up there as well. And you can follow me for all my personal stuff, my stream of consciousness put into the written word in 140 characters or less. All of my random ramblings and musings at Infamous Kid. That's KIDD. Infamous Kid on Twitter. So hit me up there. Facebook, 2 pages to follow and like, I guess. So Facebook.com/BillyTheKid and Facebook.com/TisInfamous. Always discussion threads going on there. So participate and get yourself involved. Like those 2 pages if Facebook is your social media of choice. As far as the podcast is concerned, podcast can be found wherever podcasts can be found. So you found this here for this particular episode, but you can find us anywhere that you get your podcast from. So iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, Blueberry, wherever it is that you want to get us, go ahead and get us. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation is there for you to find. We just ask that you subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode. They get delivered right to your mobile device, so your phone or your tablet or wherever you listen to your podcast, right to you every single time so you never miss an episode. Subscribe. Also, rate the show. So give us 5 stars if we're doing a 5-star effort. 4 stars, 4-star effort, but we're just round it up to 5. 5 stars will always help. And comment if you can. Just drop a couple words to let people know what a good job we're doing so that they keep listening as well. And then tell your friends. So subscribe, rate, and comment. That's all it is that I ask from you. Once again, you want to email me? Go ahead at the IWC show at gmail.com. The IWC show at gmail.com. Want to know my take on anything that is going on since we had hiatus? Go ahead and shoot me an email or once again a tweet, and I will get back to you and respond and give you my thoughts on anything you want to put out there. With that said, I'm going to get on out of here. So I'll be back later this week to talk more wrestling. Not Hell in a Cell, but something else. So in the meantime, you have yourself a pleasant, immediate future, and I'll be back because we have returned. So I'll see you later in the week. Bye for now. Peace. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation has been a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.